All right. All right. Guys, it's podcast time. And we're going to get into it pretty quickly. But as you tune in on the Instagram stream, remember, stick around to the end. We are going to do some Q&A after the podcast is done. But we're going to get going pretty quickly. And today we're going to talk about the stories that you tell yourself. And when I'm talking about the stories that you tell yourself, the main ones that I'm talking about are the stories you tell yourself of why you can't do something. Now, I'm going to start with a little bit of a story about myself with this because I think it's going to be very relatable. And then we're going to talk about we're going to talk about some other stories, and then we're going to talk about how to change the narrative for yourself. So we're going to go now in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I am your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are talking about the stories you tell yourself about why you can't make it. Now, what do I mean when I say that? I know that's a little bit of a wordy title. Basically, these are those little stories in your mind, reasons why, it's just not going to work for you, reasons why, the dreams that you have or the goals you have for your career aren't realistic, those reasons outside of your control. So I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and then from there, we're going to talk about some other examples of this, and then we're going to talk about how to change the narrative. So the story about me. When I was 13 years old, I think was the first time I talked about wanting to own a gym. I was kind of thinking like, oh, wouldn't it be cool, like get to just go to this place that I own, that I'm basically just talking about how cool it would be to own a gym, like, have all these clients, have all these athletes at my gym and all of this. And I remember, at the time, I never really knew what went into owning a gym. So I kind of chalked that up to not being possible. And, well, it's not really possible because like, I don't really, it just like, it doesn't make sense. And it probably costs a lot of money. And like, there's all these reasons not to do it. So like, yeah, it's not possible for me. And when I started kind of moving through life, thinking of these other things that I might want to do. And I remember eventually coming back to, I want to be a strength and conditioning coach. I want to train athletes for a living. And when I would talk about that, one of the most common questions I would get back is people asking me, well, once you're done doing that, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do after that? And I remember as they would ask me those questions, as I would kind of hear people not even necessarily say, hey, that's not going to work for you, but kind of not really understand that as a reality, I would always just come back to like, oh, well, I guess that's not possible. I guess, again, that's just like, oh, I can't do that because like it's not a real job, or, there aren't jobs in the industry, or they don't pay a lot of money, or, it's just not possible, right? Like you kind of put that limitation on, well, I can't do it because there's no jobs in the industry. I can't do it because it's not a real career. I can't do it because, whatever other reasons that I wanted to give myself. And then I remember being in first year university in a modern languages degree and coming back to my dorm one day and being like, man, what the fuck am I doing? Like I was deciding that I was going to go be a teacher. And I was like, man, I didn't like school when I was in it. What possibly makes me think I would like school after, having graduated? And I remember thinking like, man, I'm going to work for 4 years, go to classes that I don't hate, but I don't really like, to get a degree I don't really want, to hopefully get a job that I already don't really like the sound of. It's like, this sounds fucking awful. And I remember that being the turning point where I decided to actually try to go for strength and conditioning. Like that passion had never disappeared. Through first year, basically, if I wasn't in class, I was at the gym and I was helping athletes on all of the different school teams, other students that just wanted to learn how to lift weights, basically anybody who was willing to listen. And while I was doing that, eventually when I said like, I'm working towards this degree, I don't want to get a job, I don't want to live a life I don't want, like, kill me now. And I realized I would rather take a shot at something I actually wanted, something that, I could be happy doing every day, instead of automatically decide that what I actually wanted out of life wasn't possible because it wasn't quote unquote realistic. And so when I actually made that decision, don't get me wrong, there were still a lot of doubts and there were still a lot of moments of, Like, I remember the deal I made in the beginning was, if I don't make something of this by 25, then I'm going to go back to school, be a teacher, or, some other shit. And then by 25, I was making about $1,000 a month, barely scraping by rent, living in a shitty apartment, driving a broken down old piece of crap car. And I just remember waking up at 25 and being like, man, fuck that. I'd rather be making $1,000 a month, barely surviving doing this, than make thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars a month doing something else. So I kept doing it. And I kept doing it. And the biggest shift and the biggest thing that got me to continue and got me not to quit when that kind of thing would come up, or when things would be difficult, or whatever it might be, the biggest shift that got me to continue was understanding that the stories that I was telling myself before of why I couldn't make something work were bullshit. Like, I remember when I started at the Athlete Factory, the gym I moved to Calgary for in 2017. I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm not good at like selling, or I'm not good at marketing, or I'm not good at like business. I just, I'm not good at any of that stuff. I just want to coach. And then I remember coming to that gym and then them being like, well, it's up to you to find your own clients. And I was like, well, like, I'm not good at marketing, and I'm not good at selling. I'm not good at all that stuff. And then I realized, I was like, I'm not good at all that stuff because I haven't fucking worked at it. So instead of just telling myself that I'm not good at it, why don't I actually try to get better at it? Right? And this is something I see a lot of athletes struggle with too. And sure enough, from 2017 to 2019, while I was at that gym, I went from not being good at selling or not being good at marketing to being the number one person bringing clients into that gym. There was nobody who was bringing more clients into the gym than me. And the reason was because I understood that the stories I was telling myself of why I couldn't make it, why it wouldn't work, what I wasn't good at, were bullshit. It was just an assumption I made because I hadn't actually worked at improving those skills. But as soon as I actually started putting effort into those things I wasn't good at, I started to get better at them. And then when I went off and started my own business, I ran into a lot of the same things. I started my business in 2019, and I remember telling myself, like, I was better at selling and marketing at that point. I was better at the business side, but I was like, man, I'm just not good at like keeping myself organized. I'm just always disorganized. I'm not good at like keeping to a schedule. And then again, I started realizing that I'm not good at it because I don't fucking try to be good at it. I'm not good at it because every day I wake up and I just kind of do random shit. But as soon as I started saying, okay, if I want to grow this business, if I want to help more people, if I want to grow on social media, if I want to do all of these things that I say I want to do, I need to stop accepting the story that I've been telling myself of, you're just disorganized. Oh, you're just not good at keeping that in line. You're not good at keeping track of this or that. And I've got to actually work on systems to keep track of those things. I've got to actually work on systems to keep myself more organized. I've got to actually put the work into the weaknesses to show that the story that I'm telling myself is bullshit. And sure enough, 4 years after starting the business, which still feels crazy, actually almost 5 years after starting the business, which is insane, makes me so happy to see that. After like 5 years after starting the business, I've got people working for me now, and I've got systems. I've got 80 plus clients in countries all over the world. Because instead of just accepting I'm not good at marketing and social media, I started working at marketing and social media. Instead of just accepting I'm not good at keeping myself organized, I started working at keeping myself organized. Instead of accepting I don't have the money to invest in a coach to help me with my business, I accepted the fact that I was just putting my money in the wrong places. I was buying things that I didn't need to be buying. I was spending money at bars on the weekend and then telling myself that I didn't have money to invest in a business coach. It was bullshit. And this is something that I see with athletes a lot as well. Don't get me wrong. Like, I understand that there are some situations where, when it comes to hiring a coach or whatever it might be, athletes are truly in a position where they cannot afford it. But if you're listening to this, I would challenge you and I would ask yourself, where are you spending your money? Because if you say that being a top level athlete, whatever the sport is that you compete in, is truly like the number one most important thing to you in the world, and you're saying, no, I can't, bring on a coach, I can't travel to train, I can't go for extra private sessions with my skills coaches, whatever it might be, ask yourself, where is that money going? Because I hate to break it to you, if you're going out to the bars twice a week and spending $100 at the bar, and then you're saying you don't have money for a strength and conditioning program, a nutritionist, extra coaching, whatever it might be, it's not that you don't have money for it. You're just not that fucking serious of an athlete. You're prioritizing going and poisoning your body twice a week to doing something that's going to help you further your career. Now, is that me telling you that you're never allowed to go out to the bar? You're never allowed to have a little bit of fun? No. But change your language. Understand that the story you're telling yourself about not having the money to do it is bullshit. And it's actually just you prioritizing different things over what you said was the most important goal. So we're going to transition this a little bit. And we're going to talk about another incredible example that I hope is really going to stick with you guys when it comes to the stories you tell yourself. So if you follow me, the chances are you watch fights in some capacity or another, whether that's UFC, boxing, etc. And so you've probably heard the name Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou was the UFC world champion for a period of time. He transitioned over to boxing at a really close fight with one of the greatest boxers of all time. Obviously, his last fight did not go his way, and I'm not here to talk about that. What I am here to talk about is where that dude came from. Because if you followed his story, you would know that, I can't remember the exact amount of time. If somebody in the comments knows how long it was from when he was, had started MMA to like where he's at now, I'd love to hear it. So if you know that answer, please drop it in the comment. But this dude was working in like salt mines or something like that. He was like dirt poor, homeless on the streets of France. And then from that beginning, working in the mines and everything in Cameroon or something, was it? But anyways, this dude was like the absolute bottom of the barrel, in no position to ever make anything of himself. And again, this is no insult to anyone who's worked in a mine or anything like that. I just know there's probably somebody that hears that and is going to get upset about it. But this dude was not in a position to have achieved the things that he's achieved in his life. But when he got the opportunity to join an MMA gym and he started working at that, he went from homeless to a UFC champion. There have been other guys in the UFC who have, like Jared Gordon is one of my favorite examples of this too. I remember seeing him win a fight in Madison Square Garden. And in his post-fight interview, he talked about how he used to shoot heroin. He used to shoot heroin near Madison Square Garden, and now he's fighting in Madison Square Garden, winning fights at the highest level in the world. So it's like whatever position you're in right now, whether that's, a tough financial position, whether that's, you're just like not living close enough to the gym or, whatever it might be, you've got to understand that when you're telling the story, you're telling yourself, well, I can't do it because of this, or it's easy for them, but it's not easy for me because I have this or that issue. Understand that the story you're telling yourself is bullshit. If Jared Gordon can go from shooting heroin nearby on the streets near Madison Square Garden to fighting in Madison Square Garden, you can go from losing your job to getting back to training and actually making something out of your career. You can go from, being broke in your early 20s to getting a job, saving some money, being able to put it towards your career and making something out of the sport you want to make something out of. Every person on the planet has an opportunity. But the key and how we want to change the narrative with these opportunities, how we want to change the narrative is just the way you speak to yourself. So, coming back to that story about me, when I would talk to myself and I would say like, I need to find my own clients, but I'm just not good at, putting myself out there. Immediately when I would say that, it would make me not want to do it. I'm not good at using social media. So I was like, I just won't. But then when I don't use social media, what happens? My marketing doesn't go well. When I don't market well, what happens? Clients don't come in. When clients don't come in, what happens? I continuously do not improve the state of, at the time, it wasn't my own business, but now it is, the business does not improve. And the same thing, like when I was talking about, learning how to use social media when I started my business, when I was talking about, oh, I'm just not good at staying organized. If you tell yourself, I'm not good at this, then you're going to continue to find evidence of not being good at that thing. And then when you tell yourself that you're in a position that, oh, it just can't work for me because, money's so tight, or because of this or because of that, or whatever it is, you continue to find evidence for why it won't work for you. But when we change the narrative, what that looks like is, for myself, it was, I might not be good at social media right now, but what's something I could do to improve how I market and how I sell today? And then I would put the effort into that thing that I was able to improve the way I was running my business. And then I would take a step forward. Was I the best at it? No. Am I still the best at it? No. But when you focus on the things that you can control and you focus on the things that you can do to improve, you're going to make it a lot further. So if you're listening to this right now and you're like, well, I want to be an athlete, but I'm just not in a good financial position to train. Okay, what's the thing that you can control? Right now, if you don't have a job, you can start looking for jobs. Right now, if you have a job, but it's not paying you very much money and you're not able to, afford the memberships at the gym or whatever else it is, well, then ask yourself, how do I get more money? Number one, do I need to find a job that is going to pay me more? And can I start looking for that? Number two, are there areas that I'm spending money in that I probably don't need to be spending money in? Like I mentioned, going to the bars twice a week. And guys, that can be something as simple as driving a car that's too fancy. For a long time, I drove a 2003 beat to shit old Toyota Corolla that had three door handles on 4 doors. And the reason was because my money needed to go elsewhere, with rent, with food, with just living month to month, day to day. I didn't have the extra money to spend on a car. I have a much nicer car now, but it's because I've put myself in a position where I can actually afford to make payments on that car without putting me under, without having to sacrifice things that I need. That can be as simple as the house or apartment that you live in. If you live in an apartment that costs you $2,500 a month and you're making $3,100 a month, that's probably not where you should be living. You should probably be renting a room for $500 a month from someone who has a spare room in the apartment or house that they own or rent. You know what I mean? But a lot of people don't want to humble themselves and put themselves in that situation. But then you've got to ask yourself, when you say I'm in a tight financial position, what is the thing you can control? Is it cutting down expenses? Is it finding a job, finding a new job, whatever it might be? When you focus on improving your situation, when you focus on changing the things that you can change, controlling the things that you can control, you're going to put yourself in a position where you can get out of that situation. But when you just sit around and complain about the situation, you just continue to say, well, it's not my fault, it's because of this, it's not my fault, it's because of that, and you're just pointing in every which direction other than at yourself, the situation's not going to change. So what you've got to understand, and the overarching point that this comes back to, is that the story you tell yourself is bullshit. Whatever the situation is, whatever position you're in, instead of telling yourself the story, figure out what you can do to change the narrative. So guys, that is it. That is all. I hope you got some value from this. I hope you learned something. I hope you took something away. If you did, shoot me a message across any of my social media platforms. The way that you can do that will be in the show notes below. As always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next episode.